What the was that?
Okay, why not knight g5?
So Eric Hansen questioning the king. Why? Well, we're about to find out in this crazy game. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, Magnus is currently staying in Canada in the jcibarra house. So that's why Eric's in the background while he's playing this game in the title Tuesday, played Tuesday 7th of Feb. Now, this is 3 minutes plus 2 seconds on the clock, and Magnus's opponent is this guy. So the strong Spanish Grandmaster and blitz specialist Jose Carlos Ibarra. And as an aside, when you go on his chess.com page, there's a link here to this chess site called Chess Enigma, where there's some learning courses and so on. But it got me wondering whether this guy is the famous Spanish player Rey Enigma, who's got like nearly 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and he never reveals his identity, or at least I'm not aware that he ever has. Maybe someone knows more and you can let me know in the comments. Could this be the guy? Who knows? Back to this game. Magnus starts with e4 and we get a Sicilian defence and a3 on move 2. So Magnus just having some fun now. g6 and pawn h4. Now keep your eye on this rook. It's an absolute star of the opening and into the middle game. So knight f6 develops, Magnus covers the e-pawn, and now pawn to d6 is followed by development of this bishop. We see this one fianchettoing. Magnus goes d3, knight c6, and he now brings this knight to e2, a flexible square and not walking into any bishop g4 pins, which would be annoying with the knight coming to d4. So e6 played, looks to push d5 later. Magnus drops back anticipating, d5 comes, and now Magnus gets super aggressive. He ignores the centre and pushes on, and black has a couple options here. Now you can take this pawn. By the way, the board's not going great today when I analyse because I'm in a different view here. I was forced to view it like this. And if you take with the knight on the edge of the board, well then white can take here. And the knight's left the defence of the centre. So captures, bishop takes back, and you've won a pawn. And by the way, if you take with check, eliminating the defender, well the other knight takes back, you still cover the bishop. So if we run back here, after pawn h5, by the way, d takes e was played in the game, there's also the question of what happens if you push this knight. Well, then Magnus can kick with the pawn. Bishop goes and you drop the knight back. Different game. So let's rewind. We see the pawn capture on e4, and now Magnus carries on, kicks back the bishop, and then develops here. So he's playing super aggressively, letting black eat the pawns, and black goes Pac-Man mode. And now if you're trying to play guess the move with Magnus here, good luck with this one, because it's so hard to predict. Can you guess what Magnus played? And it's like the top move when you run the engine deep enough. So here he played rook to h3. I told you to keep your eye on that one. Now you're hanging an entire piece, but actually it's immune, because then you take here with check, and after knight recaptures, which is best, then you pick up the knight, which is no longer defended by the queen. The rook is hit, and this is the big follow-up move. You hit this square, threaten the check, and it's just really good for white. I mean, every black piece is on the back rank, as we can see. So if we run it back here to rook h3, instead black now flicked in this check. And at this moment in the game, Eric actually says, go king f1. And then he realises he cannot give Magnus tips. This is title Tuesday, they're playing for money. So he immediately says, sorry. Magnus is like, look, you're going to get me banned, stop. I mean, they're joking around, but it's serious stuff these days, of course. So Magnus doesn't move his king. He was already looking to play with the bishop anyway. He takes back. Now bishop e7 develops, and Magnus brings this rook over to the centre of the board. I mean, only the world champion can play these crazy moves, and they're not actually terrible. So the queen comes to b6, pressures this pawn, but Magnus ignores, bounces back out with the bishop, and if black takes, well, it's not so great, because you can trap in that queen. I mean, you can start with rook f3 to threaten this one, but then bishop b3, long term, you're boxing in the queen, it's not good for black. So we run it back here, black castles the king instead. And now queen d2 looks to castle the king queenside, and now interestingly takes on b2 was quite decent, because the queen is no longer defending this rook in the corner, so black then has time to wriggle out, and okay, it gives counterplay. What we see in the game is knight to e5. Yes, it hits this rook, but after it slides out of the way, actually black is helping Magnus coordinate pieces and neglecting the development of the queen side. So rook d8 picks up a tempo on the queen, but not a good tempo. Magnus bounces in, hits two pieces. The only way to save both is to drop back the knight, but look how passive black is now. And now can you guess what Magnus played? Yes, he bounced back the rook. And I'm not saying yes, you would have guessed it, but yes, he just cannot stop moving that rook across the third rank. And now black feels compelled to move his rook one square away, because there is pressure coming down the d-file, which we now see after castle's queen side, two rooks bearing down, and black goes queen c6. And so when you leave the protection of this square, well, the rook would have been double attacked, the knight would have been pinned, there's pressure here, so you can see black's whole ideas. And you want to move the queen because you want to try and develop this queen side if possible later. Plus, after rook f3, yes, Magnus moves the rook again, putting more pressure here. Now we see this pawn sack of pawn to c4, and black had very little better. This is actually the top move. Now the idea is, if the pawn was captured, which Magnus didn't do, that you give the queen a square on c5. It can try and transfer across, try and defend, but still white is a lot better. But in the game, Magnus comes up with something much more swashbuckling, much more flamboyant. Can you guess what he played? So, here's where he crashes through with the second rook, takes on d7. Now, if you recapture with queen or with bishop, it's simple enough to understand. You simply win this minor piece here. And if the bishop recaptures, queen takes, and you're threatening mate, so it's no good. So coming back here, you cannot take that one. And if you take with the knight, again, there's big problems because you take here with check. King goes, and that's actually mate. So the rook is currently immune, and that's why we see this pawn kick to e5. Black's trying to get rid of the queen on the f-file. Once it goes, then you can take back with the knight. Now Magnus can take the pawn, good move. He can go queen h4, good move. He can take here, which he plays in the game. And now after the queen's come off, the bishop recaptures, the knight can take back, yes, but white's still much better. But can you find the right way to play it? What's the right continuation here? So the move to play is not bishop takes on f7 if you were looking at that one. Looks like it should be great, but after the king sidesteps, if you snap off the rook, well then black takes here with check. Now king d1 is apparently best rather than king b1 coming to the centre, but then black can take this pawn, and when you do a material count, things are actually level, and white can't make the most of this initiative. Black should be able to unravel, and then it's anyone's game. So that's not the best way to go. And if instead of taking the rook, you take here first, well again black can recapture, escape with the rook, and they're doing okay. Still a bit worse, but in the game. But Magnus finds the best continuation. So in this position here, he snaps off this bishop. Okay, so sorry about this. I just realised my mic was unplugged. It's kind of late here. I'm a bit tired to re-record the whole thing. So I hope you can forgive me for that one. Now, the rook recaptures. The knight now hops in, and this is why it's the better continuation, because Magnus gets this initiative with the knight. Now it comes here. If the rook goes back, you get the same fork as the knight comes to c7. And after the rook in the corner moves, Magnus takes here, and black doesn't even recapture, because if you take, we take with check. The king has to go for the corner, and now this one covers the checkmate, the knight does here, but after rook f7, the knight can't move or you deliver mate, and you're about to win an entire piece, so it's completely game over. So that's why black doesn't take back the knight. Instead, we see the knight coming to b6, counter-attacking this piece. And now Magnus goes really badly wrong. His best move here, as Eric calls out, is knight g5. Because after black takes here, then you crash through. And this pawn will soon be dropping, the rook and knight are deadly, and white will then be 2 pawns ahead, crushing game. But what Magnus does in the game is not knight g5, he drops the bishop back to b3, but now black takes here, Magnus recaptures, and it's game on. And by the way, look at the clock times, they are on absolute seconds here, it should be noted. So the knight comes to c3, this knight centralises, Magnus doesn't want to take, repair the pawns, so he hops in here. Rook f8, Magnus takes, king recaptures. Now he is still better here. He's got the better pawn structure,
better endgame, but after king d2, king e7, he makes such an un-Magnus-like move by going pawn to g4. Now he's probably got ideas of clamping with g5, then turning his attention to the queen side, but what he should do is start with the immediate c4, followed by b4 and so on, run the queen side pawns. When he goes g4, he now allows knight f6, and because it hits both of these pieces, you have to chop, king recaptures, and now after king e3, king g5, all the action's taking place on the king side, when actually if Magnus had just run the queen side pawns, he'd have been too fast. So now he goes king to e4 here. Now if he goes f3, there's a really instructive line, which should technically be a draw, where black takes on h6, now these pawns start running, the king comes back, and after b4, this is the key move for black, because if you go h5 too soon, the white king can actually get back across. But e4 is just this awesome distraction move. If you take with the pawn, then the king takes here. Then the h-pawn runs, and you can shoulder out the white king with the black king. If you take with the king, well then we play h5. Now at this point, you've decoyed the king away just one key square. And now when everything runs through, we'll just play the variation. Both players make a queen, and this is technically a drawn position. But okay, anything could happen. Long variation, I know, but that's what would have happened if Magnus had gone pawn f3 here. You could have had this draw on the board. But he goes king e4, and this does not offer the most resistance, because now captures here, the king comes back, now f3, but this time h5 comes, and it's just running way too fast. Magnus checks, king goes, he eats this one here, then captures and then resigns because the pawn's going through. Very un-Magnus-like to lose this endgame. If you enjoyed this one, then I'd really appreciate if you can hit that like button, do subscribe if you haven't done so already to never miss a future video, and see another amazing Magnus game, then check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and see you soon.